board here with a couple of different examples, and I'm going to take this first one. I'll do more of these like in the future if more people that have missed want to come in and learn about it. But this first one I'm going to take is if, like when I started, you've never heard of any of this stuff before. So it may feel like it's a little bit slow, or you're like, well, yeah, of course we already know all about that. But some people don't. Like, I didn't know about any of this stuff, so I just had to learn it from scratch. So instead of jumping in at a point where I think you might be, I'm just going to pretend like you've never lit anything else up in your life, and then we'll go from there.
We really never have. We're all terrified of electrification.
If in the next class you're like, hey, can we bump it up from the beginner's lesson, then we'll kind of go from there. But I'm going to start really basic and really slow. Okay. And I've got my little agenda here that I'm going to try and follow, because I have a bad habit of going off on tangents that don't pertain to what I'm talking about. So the first part is there's a lot of different ways you can choose to wire your dollhouse, depending on how you're going to power it. So if you're going to use like those little coin batteries, that's a totally different way. The bulbs are totally different, because once you plug those little bulbs into like an outlet, they'll blow every single time, because that's just too much power. So there's a lot of different ways to wire them. The two most common are the round wire and the tape wire. And I brought some of both in case you've never seen the tape wire or felt it or any of that stuff. You can take a little sample and see what it's like, but it's coated in like a plastic, and it goes together with little tiny wire brads. And I put those on here so you can kind of see it. I'll pass this around so everybody can look at it. But I wanted to explain what you're looking at here first. So we've got the round wire and the tape wire. The round wire doesn't have to be attached with any brads. You just run it wherever you want to run it, just as long as you want your piece of wire to be. And then you connect it from the power source to what you're powering. But this metal tape doesn't go around corners well. So what you have to do is you have to cut it and make 45-degree angles around things. And the way that you connect those 45-degree angles, like you see down here, is with these little tiny these tiny little metal brads. The metal brads connect your circuits. Okay, that's all they're doing. They're just running the power from this piece to the cross piece to the next piece. It has to connect, because this is covered in plastic. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you have to have something that breaks this plastic barrier and makes these two pieces touch. Now I put over little pieces of like a shipping label and some cardstock and some wallpaper, so you can kind of see what it looks like if you tried to hide either one of these systems just directly behind your wallpaper, so you can see about how flush it would be. And then this one right here I cut out and buried into the piece, and then covered it, and it's pretty flush. So those are your two types of system, the tape wire and the round wire. I'm not going to talk a lot about the tape wire today, because I don't think that that's a great system, even though it's been around for so long. The reason is because of those little brads in every spot, in every corner. If it fails somewhere and you can't find why your light isn't lighting up, you have to backtrack to every intersection to see which one is
and it will fail.
And it will, like the house. I don't know if you saw the house. Anybody that was at Mini Mansions, she had me looking at one of her houses. There was one light she couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. Luckily for us, it was wired with round wire, so it was easy to kind of track it back and figure out what was going on. But if it was this wire, we would have had to tear things up. You would have had to get whatever you've covered it with. If you put it under flooring or put it under wallpaper, you've only got one option. You either rewire the whole thing or you backtrack from spot to spot. So that's why I don't like this wire system, because those brads, they work themselves loose and the connections get old. So we're not going to talk too much about that. That was pretty much all I wanted to cover on the tape, unless anybody has any specific questions about it. That was pretty much as in-depth as I was going to get on that system.
So
now,
if you're doing just a room box, is tape okay for that? Like you're just say you're having two lights on the back wall and one light on the ceiling, or you would still recommend the round wire for all of that?
I would never use this tape wire.
Never.
This tape wire that I've got. So Mini Mansions gave me this bag of stuff at a huge discount for this thing. So That's the only reason I have this tape wire is because it was in that bag. I've never purchased or used tape wire in any of my stuff. And that's the reason why, because if you move it around, these little nails that you'll see when I pass this board around, they're like any other kind of little connectors. They have little eyelets on them, so they're supposed to keep them in, but they just don't, they're not a great option. But technically speaking, the round wire, and this will be nice and confusing, the round wire and the tape wire are exactly the same thing. They're just presented in different packages, but they're exactly the same thing. One's just flat and one's round. That's your only difference. But the flexibility with this wire here, on this display I wanted to show you, if you're running it around corners, obviously you could just take it and bend it in any direction that you want without making your splices. So those are the two types that I wanted to cover, because they're the most common parts. Now you can do like with the batteries, and you can use this same wire for your battery system if you wanted to have a house that had like the little coin batteries. The wire still works for those. It would just be your power supply that is different. So moving on to the power supply.
Preston, do you want us to bring our chairs and sit like right in front of you? Would that be easier?
Whatever you want to do is fine.
Yeah, so we can see and you don't have to. I think that might be easier. Should we do that front?
I just don't want to keep turning.